Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Player's Edge. We have the full cast in the house tonight with Terry Hollywood. Hey, we have just survived Kentucky Downs Thomas. Of course, we have the now, according to Jamie Martinez, irreplaceable Swiss Army Sean. And our guest this evening is Woodbine race caller Robert Geller. Robert, how are you this evening?
Doing all right. Thank you, Rich. The night air is a little bit changing, and I can feel the seasonal shift as we come to this time of year. It's always beautiful in the day, and the sun drops off, and you can tell when you get to the last race of a program, it's like, ooh, there's a shift in weather. But it's beautiful. It's been a really lovely summer. Very nice.
Looking forward to that first bit of snow there, huh?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I think so. So I put in the, I'm going to put a lot of pressure on you this evening, Robert, because I put in the description on YouTube and Facebook that I'm dumbfounded by Woodbine. I haven't been able to figure that one out yet. So I promised everybody watching that you were going to share all the secrets to winning at Woodbine. So with that introduction, what are the secrets to winning at Woodbine?
Well, it's interesting because the sentiment you just shared was probably my first sentiment. I echo those sentiments when you're first trying to work Woodbine out. And one of the things I've noticed, and it probably goes back to a trip I had in '93, which was my first experience at Woodbine, when I was there, that horses who ran at the back of the field in the previous start, I thought, how come they're coming out and winning? And I really think that where the horse is running is pretty much the most crucial thing at Woodbine. What the class level that horse ran at the last start doesn't necessarily always translate to a result in handicapping. But I feel we have sometimes results that people scratch their heads. You need to also look at replays a lot because so much of it is maybe a horse has one move in a race, and depending on how the race pans out with field size and pace, how the race is run is so important. That move might have been wasted in some ways due to the way the race turned out. And so I think those two factors combined have been my most significant angles that I found to be helping me unlock some of the difficulties. And I think the other part, when you do have a horse that baffles you or a result that sort of makes you wonder, how did that happen? That's probably the best handicapping education of all, because then you can go back and there may be something you've really missed. I mean, I found often it's Lasic's first time, or sometimes it's been a pattern in the way that horse has been handled, or the way in which there might suddenly be a bullet work. Anyway, all those to say, there's no right or wrong. And I think it's very much, in some ways, a value track if you can work those things out.
It's like every day at Kentucky Downs for me. Terry, how are you this evening?
Hey, I'm doing really good. Hi, Robert. First, I want to say I really enjoy your race calls. I think they're very entertaining, good, and accurate, too. I had a quick question for you. I was wondering if there's any particular race that's in your bucket list to be able to call. Like maybe the Kentucky Derby or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a chance to work in different places. I think from Australia, the Melbourne Cup is a race that every race caller dreams of calling. I think that would be the race that I'm like, oh, I'd love to see a Canadian trainer, Roger Atfield take a horse, or someone take a horse so I could get a chance to call that race. That's the race that I think got me hooked into racing in Melbourne, although I was always a fan of all the races. It's funny, I was asked a while back, was there a race that in the United States I really wanted to call, and it was the Belmont Stakes. For some reason, I really love distance races. I really love, the chance for a horse to really show the ability to come from the back or take them all the way. So those are the types of races I'm very much probably saying, but I've been very blessed to have a chance to call the Queen's Plate, and to me it really looked a bit familiar to the sort of, it's like the Caulfield Cup I would have grown up with in Melbourne. So I think I've got to the point where I'm just very grateful for any opportunities that I get to call big races.
Yeah, I love the marathon races also, and I was at the Melbourne Cup one time. I was lucky enough to go there, and I actually picked the horse that won the race, so it was a lot of fun.
Which year was that?
Let's see, that was about 4 or 5 years ago. I went there to see my son-in-law and his wife, who was there working for, I think, Bechtel at the time. So, and then we came back to, he was in the, let's see, I forget exactly where, he was way on the other side of the country. And then we came back close to Melbourne, and then we were able to go that day. It was really fun. People all dressed up. The ladies dressed up in their hats and the outfits that they had. It was it was a blast. So, and I love betting there because of some of the things, like I love the fact that you could bet like a pick 4 or pick 5. You could bet a percentage of it. You didn't have to bet like 50 cents or a dollar. You could say 20% or 30%. It was really kind of cool.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up there. That was that's my home where I grew up, and would go to all the racetracks. So there was Sandown Park, Caulfield Racetrack, Moonee Valley, and Flemington, which I think is a spectacular track where the Melbourne Cup is held. Yeah. Those things. Racing culture is very strong in Australia, as is the race calling culture.
It is.
It's a very much listening to it on the radio and in TABs, the Totalisator Agency boards of the off-course betting. So that was my background. Absolutely. Yeah, interesting. I'm pleased you liked it.
I did.
Speaking of Caulfield, tomorrow Thomas and I will be taking our talents in the morning at 1:00 in the afternoon Eastern for Caulfield and some of their big races tomorrow night. But before we do that, Thomas, you survived Kentucky Downs. You're back with me tonight. What's new? So I see you're in church today, by the way.
Well, we survived Kentucky Downs. I finished out with the exacta in the last race, so I felt a little redeemed, but not completely. Bob, what do you think the hardest type of race is it for you to call?
Well, there are races where there's pressure, where the expectation of the public is they're all watching a race, such as the Queen's Plate, although I really do feel I've come to really enjoy the Queen's Plate. Big races really have an added dimension where that they're going to be a lot of people who will just listen to that over and over. So there's a tendency to not want to overdo it, and yet you don't want to underdo it. It's just, I've got to the point where I just accept that the race will take me there. But there are also races which I find it's a bit of a paradox. Sometimes those shorter fields, which makes no sense to some people, are harder to call than some of the bigger fields because you're forced into dead air and there's sometimes not enough happening in a race. And I also feel races where there's a lot of expectation on a certain horse can also be a little concerning because you're forced to take your attention to that. And sometimes it can possibly take away from a call, which if you didn't know that about that expectation might have been a truer representation of the race. But all of those things are really in your mind. And I think the hardest part is to sort of get clear on tuning it all out. But those are the three sort of things that really stand out to me.
Is that why you like the longer races? Because it gives you more of an opportunity to develop a storyline as the race goes along?
To some extent, but I do enjoy the strategy of it. I think there's more of a tendency in speed in dirt racing, especially if it's shorter, that the race is really kind of opening up very quickly at the beginning. And so in the opposite in turf racing, where you're sitting as a group generally, I mean, the races can stretch, depending on the pace, but there's a lot of sort of sitting and waiting, and then there's a turn of foot. And I think my enjoyment of calling a race more than anything is being able to spot who's traveling well. And sometimes that is just as enjoyable on dirt because there's a lot of speed pressures, there's a lot of pace pressures, and you can see horses at the back just waiting to just release, and the horses at the front are under extreme pressure. And those are the types of things that are interesting. But as far as sort of what I grew up on turf racing, having the E.P. Taylor track, which is a beautiful track, magnificent opportunity for everyone to get a fair run, creates, I think, more of a flow. But I mean, I've adapted and I do welcome it all. I really do. I've even called quarter horse racing at Sunland a lot, and I really was very fearful of that at the beginning. I sort of thought, God, how many horses do you have to go through? How long does it take to sort of work out these angles? But in the end, I started to really thrive on it and love it. So often the things that you fear are the things that you get stronger at. And that's been the case a lot of the time at Woodbine because, I'm not a person who likes heights, and you're looking at, gosh, it's coming at you like that on the E.P. Taylor turf. And there's a lot of adjustments. I rave on.
So Sean is another one that's gone. He's gone from, I don't want to do YouTube to irreplaceable in a year. So Sean, how are you tonight?
I'm good. And actually, Woodbine, I actually have some success at. I take Woodbine 10 out of 10 over Kentucky Downs every day of the week. So
the cards work better for you at Woodbine then?
No. I'm handicapping tonight. I can handicap.
All right. So basically, Sean's coming out very confident. So I don't know if
I don't know about that, but I don't know about that with these 3 races, but Woodbine usually.
Don't backpedal now, son.
Robert, speaking of the announcers booth, there's a lot been made of some announcers calling photos, some calling certain parts of the track. Can you take us up to the Woodbine announcers booth? Tell us like where your blind spots are, how good of a view do you get of the finish line, that kind of stuff?
Sure. It's not a very large booth. It sort of stretches back a little bit. So you have a window that you open, even if it's cold, and you're really on top of the E.P. Taylor track. You're actually at an extremely odd angle in terms of where the E.P. Taylor races are run because, as I say, you turn your head and you are looking at basically like a traffic on a road coming at you rather than someone who'd be seated, say, in the Woodbine Club who's sitting back like I'd look at the inner turf. They have that angle. So angles are very much a bit of a concern in terms of establishing who's got the real momentum. But after just getting familiar with it, you get a sense. And then there's rail moves on the E.P. Taylor turf, which really get to a point where if they're fairly fair way out, calling the photos a little bit harder because you have to line it up and the image of where the mirror is so far back. There's also a blind spot. If you were to just stand in the booth without hanging out the window, you wouldn't see the 1.25 mile start fully. And it depends on which turf course their rail is in. But in a true position, it's better. But then they come further out and you're obscured. And sometimes I will unwillingly but reluctantly look at the TV just to see how they broke if I don't want to hang out the window that far and balance a binocular on a stand. But I think it affords you a beautiful panorama, though, and you're looking out with a very good view of the main track, of the inner turf, which I think is a great addition to Woodbine. But there are always these photo finishes that I think the secret about what I feel that I've learned over the years is it's very deceptive. Photo finishes are bobs of the head are harder to call than a really close finish where there's not a bob of the head. Bobs of the head are the nightmare of a race caller because you have to almost just be in sync with that moment. And then you're not sure necessarily if you want to take a shot. But when there's a very close finish and that horse has had a chance to go by and hasn't, and you can feel the momentum, there's that part of it that gives you confidence. But each race is very different. It's just different. Australia is absolutely obligated to take a shot. In the United States, not necessarily. In Canada, not necessarily. But I think it's clear that some fans like that, some fans don't. I don't know how it's received, but I just do what I feel. Sometimes I've erred on the side of taking a shot, but it's very gratifying when you do, and it's right, because there's nothing worse than you absolutely feel that horse has won the photo and you haven't said anything. And there are times when you can just tell momentum is absolutely key. So I feel like there's a lot of adjustments to each announcer depending on the booth. And it does, to some extent, dictate the way your rhythm is and the way you settle in. And, everyone has their little mnemonic, I think that's the right word, memorization techniques. Some announcers, especially in North America and Canada, is probably, I don't know, with Danny, I don't think I know his pattern. But a lot of them in the US where I worked did really color their program. And that's something an Australian announcer will never do. You'd be lucky to find one or two who would ever do that. So the history of the way it's been presented is different. And I've learned a bit from every culture I've been in. And whatever works for anyone, I say, just go with it. But photo finishes, I do love them. And yet they also make me feel like, oh, gosh, I hate watching those digital replays. Is it the right one,
You know what I hate about the photo finishes? I'm usually on the wrong end of it. More often than not, unfortunately. I had one yesterday at Kentucky Downs where they were doing the head bobs, and I sent Thomas an email, please, please, please. But I knew before I even pressed send that I should have said nope, nope, nope. All right, so before what we're going to work on tonight, there are 3 Breeders' Cup win and you're in races. Now, you started working there in 2015, but in 1996, Woodbine is the only course outside of the U.S. to actually host a Breeders' Cup. Is there any chatter up there that there might be another one?
Yeah, there was a little bit. Maybe it was a couple of years ago. I actually asked a question in a meeting about it. I said, this is the perfect time, isn't it, for Woodbine to put in for this? Now, I don't know what the upper management's feeling is, but there are definitely issues about the fact that Woodbine has what's considered artificial dirt. I know there's a resistance against that by a lot of people in the US. They have a view on it. I don't necessarily think it's an issue personally, because I know that Santa Anita had a Breeders' Cup with it. I do think that this is a changing world. I know that horse care and whatever's best for the horse is of paramount importance. And we, unfortunately, may be penalized by that idea, and that could go against us if we are going to do that and put in again. Personally, I think Woodbine's a fantastic choice because of the turf racing. And I don't think there's anywhere better for European visitors than Woodbine. And that's why we've got such great fields on this weekend. But I also noticed that, the very first Breeders' Cup that I watched in the North American circuit was the Woodbine one. It was 96. I started at Emerald Downs and I was watching it, and it left an impression, not because of Rick's natural start necessarily, but no, because Alphabet Soup, Cigar, there were some great races, but I was very taken by the fact that it was outside of the US, and it was my very first experience to watch it. But no, I have no answer. It's really not anything I've heard any trickle down. I think that there was a bit of energy on it a couple of years ago, but I know it's expensive for racetracks to do it. I know that we have issues now since COVID, which has come up, and you mentioned people crossing borders, but I don't think, I think it's all doable. I really do. And I would love to see Woodbine get behind that. Personally, I think Woodbine, would be very, very attractive for European shippers, very attractive. And I believe the weather that day was phenomenally lucky and good. But, I just don't, my feeling is I'm not seeing it. I'm not feeling there's a lot of talk about it in the last year, but there's been a lot of obsessive stuff going on since COVID that has taken priority. So I don't know.
All right. Well, I just thought I would ask that question. So the next questions we're going to have for you are how these races are going to turn out. We're going to start off with the Pattison Summer Stakes. This one is sponsored by FanDuel. Sean, how about that? You'll probably be tweeting about it. The winner of this race is going to go into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. It is it's race 7. It's 1 mile on the turf. They're running for a grade 1 for $500,000. I don't know if that's Canadian or US dollars. I'm going to guess US dollars. So on the turf for a 1 mile race, take us through the proper strategy to win at that level, Robert, and then let us know who you like.
Well, that's a hard one because there's not a lot of, it's hard to know if there's a lot of speed signed on. I'm looking at the field and I see a couple of horses that don't have a lot of early speed, that they'll drop out. We're talking about a mile. I've watched the videos. I'm not 100% sure how this race will pan out because firstly, they're inexperienced, some of them. But the horse that is interesting is the number 1, clearly, Mysterious Night. I did think when I watched the video, just has a lot of presence, is a muscled horse who can just kind of take a good position. But I just haven't really got a sense that how they'll measure up in terms of the way the race is run. But I do think Philip My Dear likes to sit off the pace. Sammy Stone drops out. Chisler can be maybe stalk. But Appraise I thought was interesting. I know Chad Brown hasn't done particularly well when he brings shippers to Woodbine, but at the same time, this horse did finish on really well at Saratoga, and it's really hard to line the levels up. But to me, after what I saw last year with the Godolphin horses and with the shippers, the European horses just take really to this track. I think this is the horse that really could take up position, sit handy. I don't think it'll be a problem in the field of 7 to find the right spot, but Mysterious Night's the horse to beat.
Mysterious Night. Now, Thomas, he mentioned the European horses. You and I, as we mentioned, tomorrow we're going to do, it was not European, Australian, but up until now, we have been doing mostly European horses. Do you agree with that take with Mysterious Night?
I went with number 6, Philip My Dear. 2 for 2, comes off a stakes win. It got through traffic, and I thought that was very impressive. And the speed numbers seem to keep improving. And I think if anything can beat Mysterious Night, I think that's the one to beat it. And I did take Mysterious Night for second. It's hard to beat a Charlie Appleby, William Buick, Godolphin-owned horse. It's done very well at Newberry. It tried at Newberry, it lost by a nose in its first start, then came back and won. Tried Group 2 Company at Newmarket and finished third to Persian Force, which has turned out to be a pretty good horse. And then another third, it lost to Marbam at Goodwood. And then they shipped it over to France and dropped it a little bit in class to a Group 3 and won fairly easily. It was a huge favorite. Is this field that kind of field? Probably more like the Deauville field than the fields that have been at Newmarket or Goodwood. So it's going to be the one to beat. Finally, I finished up with a praise. I don't think Chad Brown's done particularly well up in Woodbine, but this one is good enough to finish as for a third. It ran well in the Skidmore, ran into some trouble. The numbers look good. If you were to put the number against it, it's got the top number over all this field in terms of speed. And, it is still Chad Brown.
Mm-hmm. So, Robert, you're getting a little bit of fellow race caller love right here. The track announcers from Golden Gate, good friend of the show, Matt Dinnerman, saying Robert is a great race caller, a great friend, lovely person. He has earned all of his success. So that's got to make you feel good that your contemporary calls you out like that.
Yeah, that's great. We share the commonality of he followed at Emerald Downs after my tenure there. I was delighted that he got an opportunity so young and has just run with it. Very much has a fan base, and he's doing a really good job. So yeah, we get on really well. We're very similar in some ways, and I like the continuity that he brought to Emerald. It was great, and I was very much thank you, Matt.
Yeah, when we used to do this on conferencecall.com before I had any of my co-hosts here, I think Matt was actually my first guest. So thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Without you, none of this would be possible.
Wow.
So, all right, Terry, without you, none of this would be possible either.
I don't know about that. But anyway, in this race for the ninth race at Woodbine, I like the number one.
This is the seventh race, Terry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, seventh race. You're right.
Ninth pick race might be perfect.
Yeah,
it won't match up with seven. So
you're right about that. It's the seventh, but I like the number one. Mysterious Night comes in from Europe after competing in graded stake races there, winning his last race, a Grade 3 Circus Maximus. He's trained by Charlie Appleby, who's won 40% of his career starts and 100% of the time when taking a horse to a distance for the first time. And then I like number 6, Philip My Dear. He's won his only 2 career races, going for a hat trick, has a high percentage winning trainer and jockey, and he's improving each race and has the highest last race speed rating. And I like number 5, Sammy Stone, finished in second in his last start, his maiden race, trying grass for the second start, and his trainer in the last 14 days has been in the money 4 out of 6 times, winning 2 of those. And then my 4th pick is number 3, Appraise. Ran 4th in his last race after being bumped at the start of the race. He's a closer, and I think the extra distance is going to be a plus for him. And his trainer wins 32% of the time when taking a horse from a sprint to a route.
Beautiful. Sean, now you got a lot of pressure on yourself tonight because you opened up the show talking about how wonderfully well you do when you go north of the border. So, all right, lay it on us, brother.
Well, now
forget what the track announcer said. Forget what Terry has to say or Tom has to say. This is Sean's house, like Under Armour. Take it away, bro.
Yeah, it absolutely is, but I am confused. Isn't Tom supposed to be the one that picks the international horse? Tom and Terry, I feel like, usually switch on that. So I went number 6, Philip My Dear. I'm on Tom's side on this one. Has won both of his races. The only horse in the field that has win over this turf course, and it's both of his wins came over this turf course, has great connections with both his jockey and trainer, winning at over 20%. I did have a hard time figuring out the pace, and that was one hesitation. But the 2 horses that I saw going to the lead, the 2 and 3, I didn't think were good enough to take them around no matter how good of a pace they got. So I went with the 6. I went with number 1, Mysterious Knight, for second. The only other horse in the field besides my top pick that has more than one career win. We're used to the name William Buick and Charlie Appleby at this point, with them being successful in these kind of races. Has never finished outside the money in 5 career races, and obviously fits here is probably the class of the field. And then third, I did go with one of the speed horses, just in case, probably holds on for the piece. Number 2, who I think will be the early leader, 94 Expos. Should be the early leader. Stretches out to a mile. That would be the only question, too, is how far can he go with the distance. But that's the question with all of these.
That he'll answer one way or the other. All right. So for me, or she'll answer, I'm going to go with Philip My Dears too, for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. Both races on turf, undefeated, much better in race 2 than in the debut. So I like to see the horses moving up the ladder. For me, in poker, there is a old saying that people have a tell. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Rounders, when Matt Damon picked up on Malkovich's tell. Well, to me, William Buick being here and not at the, what is it, the Big Belmont at Aqueduct or something, that's some goofy name instead of just calling it Aqueduct. He could be on Nation's Pride that he rode last time for $1 million, and pretty sure knows he's going to get a win there. But instead, he's here in Woodbine. To me, that's a tell. That tells me where Charles Appleby and William Buick think they're going to cash their check. So, and there's another horse coming up too where that combination comes together. So I think that's a tell to me. I like the Mysterious horse as my second choice. Follow that up with Stay Honor Good Side. Proved the horse did show some improvement across the board. So in the early, mid, and late pace following a layoff, and has room to be better, I think, in race 2 off the break. And finally, I don't know if this is Chesler or whatever. I think this one might get overlooked because of the top 2 or 3. But his first effort on turf says just a little bit more improvement might be enough. I don't know if he's a Tom horse. Does he win? Nah. But a chance to collect the money, I think, yes. The next race we're going to do now, Terry, is race number 9. This one is the Woodbine Mile, and the Woodbine Mile winner is going to catch a free ticket down to Kentucky for Keeneland to run in the FanDuel Mile. Sean, maybe you'll be tweeting about that one.
I will be.
Yes, indeed he will. So race number 9, again, 1 mile on the turf. So pay attention to what you see in race number 7, because you might see a bias take hold. And if you do, you might want to play that bias again. Looking at this race, do you think it's also a 2-horse race here, Robert? Or do you think this one's a little more open than the last?
I think it is pretty open, actually. I know that Modern Games is certainly the buzz name, and I think it's going to be very hard to beat, even though 3-year-olds don't have a good record in this race. We're talking about a horse who's run to Baid, who's arguably the talk of Europe, with 10 out of 10, and has won very easily. And Modern Games might have lost a little bit of favor in the last couple of starts with some of the Europeans, but we're coming to Woodbine with still what looks to be very solid form. So there will be a bias in the betting towards Modern Games, especially given the connections. But I think there are other chances, and I think it's pretty interesting. There's some very nice lead-up races by other horses in the field. I mean, I watched Finest Sounds win. I was very impressed with the fantastic fighting spirit of this runner, who I think will be suited at a mile especially. I mean, Modern Game hasn't raced for a while. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem. That's often how they do it in Europe. And Tepin won this race off a long layoff, and she still managed to score on her ability. Finest Sound, I think, is interesting. I don't think he'll get 10-1 at all morning line. I think this horse is, like, I know might be considered a grade 2 as against Modern Games a grade 1, but is in form, and we've had very good success with Andrea Azzeni here. I think there's a very good chance this horse will be dangerous. I was taken by the run of Homer's Screen. This was a horse that got into a very wide trip, got into some traffic, and was finishing to what was a Del Mar field that I'm not sure how measures up, but at the same time, this horse is lightly raced. I thought had a chance, has won 5 out of 10. I know that you could go to Ivor. I'm not a big fan of Ivor, but if Ivor wins, that's great. I picked Ivor when this horse has won. I think it was at Churchill. Had some nice back class, and I think is very suited to a mile. There's another name. I can see, there's been upsets. I don't think the locals are necessarily on their best behavior. I have actually liked the run of War Bomber. I know this horse was in a really hard-fought finish last start, and I've been tracking this horse, and could cause some problems for pace scenario in this race. Is very much able to win on the turf. And I thought Get Smokin' was a pretty interesting run last start too. So there's a number of horses. Having said that, I still think we're talking about a horse as a 3-year-old who is untapped in potential for what looks to be a real desire to go back to the Breeders' Cup, where there was all that conjecture about what happened in the juvenile at the mile, and unfortunately ran for purse money only and still was first past the wire. So Modern Games has something to prove. I think this is a great stepping stone, but it's not a given at all. And I'm leaning to Finer Sound as the biggest threat. Homer Screen is a long shot play, and I think Get Smokin' is live. I think that these are the 4. But I can see it would be very hard to make a case for Town Cruise to repeat. I think March the Arch loves this trip. It would have to be crafted and everything set up well. But, the mile is tricky. I've noticed the pace of the race is very key. And, we've seen horses steal it. We've seen horses completely the opposite, burn out too quickly. I'm just not sure. Modern Games, to me, I watched a couple of those races. I wanted to see a bit more kick, held down second. So I don't know if it's the turn of foot that's worrying me, but there are horses who are definitely going to be threatening Modern Games.
Well, Terry wanted to threaten the people who scratched Modern Games last year at Del Mar. Here's your chance to make your money back, Terry. Are you going to take that opportunity, or you're going to go elsewhere?
Actually, I'm going to start out with another horse, and now I'm going to talk about the 9th. I like the number 3.
Sure you don't want to do the 7th this time, or the 10th?
No, I want to do the 9th this time. I like number 3, Wakanaka. Came in from Italy and has done very well. In graded races, finishing in the money in all but one race since coming here, winning his last race at Woodbine. So he likes the track. He has a trainer who wins 24% of the races when bringing a horse back who won their last race. And he has a great workout on September 10th of 48-1 breezing, 4th best of 113. And then I like number 2, Ivar. Just keeps improving his speed ratings, winning his last race easily with his regular rider, Smokin' Joe Talamo, in the irons. And he is a grade 1 winner and has been steadily working out in preparation for this race. Then I like number 5, Modern Games, comes in for Europe, where he finished in the money in 80% of his starts, winning 50% of those starts. He's another horse trained by Charlie Appleby. And then I like number 9, War Bomber, won his last race at Woodbine, his 3rd win out of 4 starts there, so he likes the track. He can either go to the front and lead to the finish line or close from off the pace, which is an angle I really like. And his trainer wins 25% of the time when bringing a horse back who has won their last race.
So he goes back-to-back W's pretty well. All right, you have another chance here, Tom, to pick an international horse. Modern Games. So the smile on your face says I got it right finally, probably the first time in like 8 shows. So Modern Games is Tom's first pick.
You bet it is.
Right.
Last race at Goodwood was a grade 1. It was a Group 1 race. It beat a Breeders' Cup winner. It beat other Group 1 winners, and it lost the race because the horse by the name of Baid was in there. It ran a good race. There's no question about it. But it's not as good as Baid. And, I think it seems to be a 3-year-old who's suited for the mile. When he did try longer in the Paris, in the Paris Longchamp or in the Deauville, I think race was just too short for him. And interestingly, in the Deauville race, none of those horses have come back and won. So, it just 7 furlongs, I don't think is the distance for him. Even though earlier in his career he was running those, but that mile seems to be where his sweet spot is. And, let's face it, you got Charlie Appleby, William Buick, Godolphin. Yeah, there's a few bucks behind those guys. 3, Wakanaka is my next choice. She's shipped to Woodbine last time out, won a grade 2 nicely. Her first start in the U.S. was a 5th in a grade 1. That's okay, because the next 3 races she raced were all in graded stakes races. She finished 2nd, 3rd, and 2nd. She started her career in Italy, and Team Valor purchased her and brought her over. Let's face it, 13 starts, 7 wins, 4 seconds, 1 third. Can't complain about that. And she's faced the boys before, and she's going to do it again. I really liked Ivar's race, number 2, last time out. He beat a horse by the name of someone like a Hot Brown in that race, and he won last time out at the Kentucky Downs
last week.
So he's for his age, he's only run 12 times. Got 6 wins. Can't beat it. He's a grade 1 winner, and he's always competitive in these types of races, and I don't see him not being competitive again.
All right, Sean. Well, normally I would rotate the order, but you're going to be last all the time because you said this is your best track. So we'll save the best for last, Sean.
I didn't say it was my best track, but okay. I'm going Modern Games. I was wondering, how many people besides Terry was getting nightmares when I seen this name and cringing from that whole moment. I think this is why Buick and Appleby are here, obviously, for Modern Games. Be tough to beat here. Won 5 of 10 career races. All were on the turf. Likes the distance in the 2 starts. Has a win in second, like Tom said. Last time out, lost to one of the best horses with Bag Eat, and it was by less than 2 lengths, too. So this horse really performed well. I think he just overpowers this field. Second, I went number 3, Waganaka. Has won 7 of 13, like Tom said. This would be the 4th time trying the distance. Previous 3 hit the board. Usually I like to see a win when you have that many starts, but she's been consistent. Won at Woodbine last time out, which was her first try there. Now gets Manny Franco aboard and cuts back in distance from the last start. Third, I went number 4, Finest Sound. Has hit the board in 16 of 20 career races on the turf. Last time out in England, lost by a neck to Jadomi, who won a grade 2 in Ireland this past weekend. And actually, that was one I was tweeting about. So I watched that race. Jadomi looked really good. So I would expect a good performance from Finest Sound here.
Look out, Sean, dropping some European knowledge. What is going on? I think the world's going to stop turning. Everybody hang on tight.
We're going to have to check his water.
What the hell?
I don't have any water right now.
Hell has actually frozen over, folks. Anyway, for me in this race, I think Modern Games is the one to beat. Last 5 races competitively, as they've mentioned, all in Group 1 or Grade 1s, including a win, but not a win for the bettors in the Breeders' Cup. Wakanaka looks like a miler to me with 2 wins and a pair of seconds in a 3rd and 5 outings. Ivar, as you mentioned, Tom, really jacked up his speed figures last time out. He's done so 4 consecutive races, put that number higher. Top last race speed number, though, I do wonder that at some point you're going to hit that peak and you're going to regress. So is it going to be this race, the next one? I think a regression is coming soon for Ivar. And then finally, War Bomber. I think this one has a shot to be a live long shot. As Terry said, the horse does have some versatility, but it also seems to be a horse for the Woodbine turf course. Tried it 4 times, managed to bring home the big check, the winner's check, in 3 of them. So that's pretty good numbers right there. Last race of the night is the Johnny Walker NATALMA Stakes. That is race. Whoops, I got the wrong screen open there. Race number 10 again. 3rd consecutive race at 1 mile. So by the time we get to this race, we should have a pretty good sense of what the track layout looks like and who's where you want your horse to be. The winner here is going to make it into the juvenile fillies turf, the Breeders' Cup at not Kentucky Downs, at Keeneland come early November. Any thoughts on this one? Which one of these young ones in here do you feel like Robert has the edge? Although we all agree that 2-year-olds, anything can happen.
Yes, anything. Absolutely. It is a mile. It is, there's no standout horse on paper to me. I know this sounds a bit of a crazy angle, but the Mark Casse angle where the other Mark Casse horse is in the race, and it wasn't by design. I'm going to pick Star Candy, who's the outside runner, who I thought was a very impressive debut run. I needed the run. Was second, beaten a half length by Courtly Rowe, who had a much better trip. And Star Candy did a lot of hard work and just got caught, but I think really gave that horse a lot of benefit for a race of this caliber. I know Adora was flying home late, and that was picking up a late piece, but was never a winning chance that day, but was the other Mark Casse horse who I think will get a lot of action. And Star Candy with Declan Carroll might be a value play in this race. But I could see, we've got a lot of Cairo Prince horses who love the turf. Cairo Consort has really been able to take benefit of running up the rail and has had excellent trips, draws gate 1. But I did think, I'm not sure what to make of G. Laurie, because you're looking at an Oscar performance sire, and we've got a horse that won at, it was 6 lengths, and that was a Colonial, but taking a shot here against them, I don't think there's a standout horse with some of these locals. I mean, Last Call is Kevin at Tards, Wickenheiser is Kevin at Tards, and Courtly Row. And actually, Wickenheiser interests me the most out of those because Wickenheiser was trying to make ground on what was a very inside track bias. The last start, Adora got second, but Wickenheiser had a tough trip. And the previous start, when there wasn't that bias, when the rail was perhaps in the true position, came up and won. And I think we'll be better off in this race. But I think there'll be some value in this race. To me, Star Candy has, inexperience, but I just get the feeling it's by Candy Ride at Giant's Causeway Dam. I think there's a sense that this Mark Casse horse will be a threat. So as my top selection for second place, I think I'd put in G. Laurie because of the reputation of the Oscar performance angle on grass, and hopefully has the ability. It's hard to measure the colonial form. And I wouldn't be surprised if Wickenheiser picks up a piece, but there's a lot of horses who could sneak if the pace is slow. Last Call would be favored, but Weekend Last Start. Adora needs a pace setup. Has been in and out of town. I'm not sure on that one. Courtly Row had a beautiful setup. I don't think is a world beater at all. And the horse that's in form, Cairo Consort, I think might be overbet. Collecting Flatter to me, I don't think the field has been that strong, even though beat Adora. So for me, Star Candy.
Star Candy. Terry, who's for you?
All right. Well, I'm going to start out with number 1, Cariel Consort. Won her last race at Woodbine. She has the highest last race speed rating. Her best turf speed is fastest among today's starters. She has a really good workout on September 10th. And then I like number 3, G. Laurie. Was well bet in her race and won by 6 lengths. It was a 1.16 mile race, which shows she can handle the distance. She is trained by a high percentage winning trainer who wins 21% of the races the second time his entry starts in a grass race. And then I like number 2, Collecting Fatter, has won 2 out of 3 races in her career, and she's trained by a jockey, has a trainer-jockey combination who in the last 14 days have been in the money 5 out of 7 times, winning 2 of those. And she has a good 5 furlong workout on September 9th. And then number 7, Courtly Row, won her last race at Woodbine by closing at 7 furlongs. And I think the extra furlong should help her chances. She has a high percentage winning trainer and jockey.
Thomas, take us through your thoughts on
I went with number 3, G. Laurie is my top choice. I think Graham Motion, it wouldn't ship up there if he didn't think he had a decent horse. And I think that colonial form will come through with a 6-length victory. Speed number wasn't great, but that opportunity to win you're in is certainly something that's being dangled in front of Graham Motion. And this one looks good enough to do it. 1, Cairo Consort, my next choice. I like the fact that she's won in 2 different styles. She's won wire to wire, and she won sitting off the pace. So we won by 2.5 lengths in that stakes race, and the added distance I don't think will bother her. And I think the works coming into it are good enough to get her there. Finally, I went with Robert's choice of number 8, Star Candy. I like that last race. Got caught at the end, but really ran all heart. Now they put a good work into her, and I think she's going to learn, and I think she could be the major threat here.
Sean, we get to learn from you one more time on the Woodbine greatness.
So I thought Robert was going to go through all his picks and never mention my top pick, and he didn't give me. One person knows Woodbine better than me. It's Robert, and he didn't give me the strongest endorsement.
You think there's only one person that knows Woodbine better than you?
No, right. And out of us 5 here.
Okay. Clarifying that.
So what does Chris P always say? Pace makes the race. I don't see anybody going with collecting Flatter. This horse went wire to wire on both of her synthetic starts, and then turf. She was battled all the way, and a couple horses did beat her, and she beat some other ones, but she held on for a game third. I think if she gets out there, she has a good shot of taking them all the way. The only question would be distance, but a lot of these horses have that same question again, distance, as they haven't been stretched out yet. And you're going to get a nice price, 8-1 morning line, and Robert's not selling her very well. So number 6, Wickenheiser for second was in the same race as the top pick and only finished fifth. However, she had to go 8 wide in that race. So another one that got a bad trip in that race. She was also the betting favorite in that race. This horse, there's no question on the distance as far. She's bred very well for it. Number 3, J. Laurie. She's only ran once, but it was an impressive win on the turf at Colonial. That also was with Mile in the 16th. She's the only horse in this field to go over 7 furlongs, so she's the only one that has proven at this distance.
I'm going to start off with the one horse, the Cairo Consort. Horse improved dramatically in her last 2 races. Going to go long for the first time, which I think is actually going to be helpful to that horse. Did show it can win from the lead. Did show, as Terry mentioned, it could come from off the back. Wickenheiser, as you guys mentioned, was the favorite. Sean last time out had to go very, 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 very wide. Trainer Kevin Attard rebounds at 26% the next time around the track with beaten favorite. Collecting flatter, I don't know, Robert, but is it me, or is it like if a horse has the flatter bloodlines, they seem like they all do very well at Woodbine, so I wouldn't be surprised if this one does even better. Ran better early times in her last race despite adding a furlong. I always like to see horses that go longer and their times go down. So length goes up, times go down, usually a sign for me that a horse is getting into top form. Finally, Courtly Rowe showed well versus many of these, and I expect the odds to go up because there's other horses that will track money, but I think it'll outrun its odds. So that takes us through our picks for the 3 Win and You're In Breeders' Cup Challenge Series races. Robert, we appreciate you joining us tonight. For folks that want to keep up with you on social media, how can they do that?
It's through Twitter at Woodbine Geller. Woodbine Geller, Geller. So, yeah, feel free to contact and leave whatever you want to say. But yeah, I'm not on anything else but that, really. Yeah.
So if folks make the trek up to Woodbine, what's Robert's go-to spot to grab something to eat after the races?
Mm-hmm. Oh, after the races.
Well, before the races, whatever.
Well, I'm always eating. But there's a fantastic little sort of hole-in-the-wall Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, near the College District. It's Chinatown in Spadina. Fantastic fried rice. The best I've ever had. I love that place.
Well, why don't you plug it? What's the name of the restaurant for the folks that are up there?
I have no idea.
Just go to all the Chinese restaurants, you'll find one.
And I'm like, okay, there's the intersection with Dundas, and then you walk down, and it's the second one where all the ducks are hanging out, and I'm like, the roasted duck. I'm like, that's the one.
So the Chinese restaurant by the roasted ducks in Toronto. Make sure you go over to there for sure. Well, hopefully we roast our picks this weekend and do very well at Woodbine. We appreciate your time. I'm not so sure I learned the secret to winning at Woodbine. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to learn from Sean. All right, Robert. We appreciate your time tonight. Good luck this weekend. As Terry mentioned, we all love your race calls. Obviously, you got some great compliments from our good friend, Matt Ditterman. Call on the hotline. Yes. What a career for sure. From Rockin' Ray. All right, gentlemen. Thank you for coming. Gentlemen, no matter what you're doing. Oh, tomorrow on Saturday, I know that Eddie P and Chris P, always move those two up. They've got some additional coverage on the Woodbine races on Spot Play, so you're going to make sure you check that out. Thomas and I will be back tomorrow to cover Caulfield, as we mentioned at the start. Until we meet again, no matter what it is that you do, gentlemen, we certainly hope it ends up in one place, and that is in the
Winner's Circle.
Absolutely. Have a fantastic night. Thanks again, Robert. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich.